Well, we've already broken that wall. First
Glad
thing out of
we
the
broke
box.
that rule.
Hello, nerds, and welcome. We are the Foul-Mouthed crew that's going to be bringing you your nerdy episode today. My name is Travis. I am joined, as always, by my fantastic co-hosts, Eric, James, and I say swear words randomly, Ryan. This week's episode, we're going to be talking about horror movies that are based on true stories, which is always my favorite. But before that, we have a series of shout-outs, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Eric.
Hi, I'm
Hello.
Shout Out Guy. So a couple people wrote back in regards to our episode last week with games and stuff like that we talked about. Glitch, he's one of our fans from TikTok. He said he enjoyed Nightmare Creatures. It's not his first one, but I'm assuming it's his favorite because it's the one he brought up. McKenneth Richard Styles from TikTok played Friday the 13th, the online edition, which James brought up last week that I totally zoned on. I apologize. Aiden from TikTok brought up Layers of Fear, which he said actually developed into an irrational fear of paintings. Of Gods and Game Masters said Chill, which I guess is a tabletop game, and then Creature Feature, which is a card game. And the AARPGs, which is a great other podcast if you enjoy live gaming and things like that. I usually listen to them, especially when they played Aliens. That was such a great set of episodes. They said Vampire. And last but not least, Survive LLC. They came and actually went with more of a real life thing and said theirs was trying to go into an abandoned asylum and seeing how far they could make it before running out. So that is everyone that responded in regards to our
the front door. That's where I make
first?
it. I'm leaving. I'm not doing that.
The front door, yeah.
I don't really believe in the spooky stuff, but why risk it?
There you go.
Why tempt
As someone
fate?
who
Have you
very
guys
much
seen-
believes in the spooky stuff. Yeah, I'm not risking that. So me and Bones hanging out outside. We'll keep the car running as we go
Have
to
you seen
Dairy Queen.
Have you seen the meme where it's like the two boxers and one of them starts going "Ka," and the other one just quits, and it shows the post-fight interview. He's like, I'm pretty sure he couldn't, but I wasn't about to find out if he could.
I'm so excited for tonight. I think the shout-outs were really good. The ones that I missed, obviously, Nightmare Creatures, 2003, absolutely fantastic. That one I have played. Layers of Fear is a newer one, 2016. And for anybody that's into Baroque horror, lots of paintings and classics getting twisted and that kind of stuff. Excellent suggestion.
I'm pretty
and I
broke.
appreciate it. But we are doing a particularly fun brand of scary tonight. It's one of my very, very favorites because
Nope,
not only
we're jumping the gun.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
we gotta do the two new games.
Yeah, we got.
Well, actually,
we got two new horror
that actually
games.
reminded me. There's actually 3 games that we got to talk about real quick. So one just released is the remaster or remake of Silent Hill 2. I've been
Silent
watching a
Hill
little bit of it on Twitch. Looks great. I will probably be picking that up at some point. The next thing is Saber Interactive, who just recently released Space Marine 2, are releasing a horror game based on A Quiet Place, which, I mean, has been a phenomenal series of movies by Steve Krasinski. And, the other one that was just recently announced is a sequel to Alien Isolation in the works. And Alien Isolation was really good, so I'm pretty pumped for that.
Underrated.
I agree.
It was so good. I even let my kid play it, and I definitely shouldn't have.
I'm super excited about it. I know, me personally, probably the game that got me into the genre was Silent Hill 2. I remember sitting in my grandparents' second story with my cousin and my brother playing Silent Hill and Silent Hill 2 alongside Resident Evil DualShock Edition, and definitely got me into the entire genre. So blame them and R.L. Stine, and we end up where I am now.
We
Silent
did
Hill
bring
was
up R.L. Stine
definitely
when we were talking about most people's introduction to horror was with Goosebumps back in middle school.
Goosebumps. Yeah.
Oh, there's a new Goosebumps movie, too. There's a teaser trailer released.
Let's check it out. I hope it's better than the Jack Black one. I was kind of disappointed in that one.
It was all right.
Okay, it was aggressively okay.
Yeah, it was aggressively okay. I'm going to go ahead and yank the reins a little bit here because it ties into our intro. And what I was starting off with the type of horror that we're dealing with tonight is the kind that in my opinion, is the most fun, and it's the one that is based on real-world events, on unexplained phenomena and happenings in the real world that caused amazing creators and artists to develop long-running franchises, right? And this can be recognizable names just like Wes Craven, all the way down to the obscure and the forgotten. With Silent Hill 2 coming
How
out,
can you not start alphabetically with Alfred Hitchcock?
because its last name, Craven, comes before Hitchcock.
No, it's first name. First name.
But I do want to bring up Centralia, Pennsylvania, and the real-world Silent Hill. Now, many people are aware of the story, right? I'm sure you guys are. But with Silent Hill 2 coming out, I did want to touch on this one very, very briefly. So, Centralia, Pennsylvania, I think it's Pennsylvania, almost positive. Yeah. This was effectively a coal mining town that, if I understand the story in very brief terms, because I'm not going to spend too much time here, we got a lot to cover tonight, but the coal mines underneath the town that formed a tunneling webway caught on fire. And from what I can tell, are still burning. And so you end up with the unstable, abandoned atmosphere full of ash and smoke.
Yeah, went from a population of in the thousands to currently 5 residents
Yeah.
during the 2020 census.
Good God.
Yeah, that's quite the decline. That coal mine has also been burning since 1962. I'm looking at the article on it.
Yeah. So yeah, for those of you that are not aware, obviously Silent Hill is a franchise that deals with handling emotional turmoil and grief and madness, on the surface at the very least. And it does so through storytelling that involves in-between realities, dimension shifting, and body jumping. And so you end up as a spiritual form of yourself trapped in a purgatory town, exploring its demonic and reality-twisting creatures.
Teaches you how to deal with PTSD.
Yeah, but yeah, and I'm not saying the game was based on it, but the story of Centralia definitely mirrors Silent Hill's, at least aesthetic, and setting so closely that it kind of blows my mind.
It's always crazy whenever you see like a story like that, like mimic like a game that's so good. Like the story was just so good. Like the graphics to me, even at the time, were average. It's really the story that grabbed me for Silent Hill. Like even the gameplay was so slow, but it was just, and it was fucking scary. Like because it was so slow and so dark, like you just, it was good.
Oh yeah, well, and that was my favorite part about those games is while there were a few moments that were, I guess, technically jump scary, right? You get the type of jump scare where you're slowly walking up to an open door, and like a cat screams and runs out of it. It's that kind of jump scare, right? But the entire game just evoked this dissonant dread that I think really captured an atmosphere unlike any other game did at the time. And I know I jumped in front a little bit here, but I wanted to cover that one very, very quickly because I think it's a truly fascinating story. I want to encourage all of our listeners out there to not just do all the fun algorithm things like, subscribe, and share, but check out some of the stories we're going to be talking about tonight. I know Jimmy Bones has a well of information on more than one franchise coming in tonight, and we're going to be discussing everything from potential possessions all the way down to madness and serial killers. So
I have one last thing to add for you, just for a fun fact. As of 2010, only 5 homes remain standing in Centralia, Pennsylvania. They have demolished the rest of all the buildings due to condemnation and eminent domain laws, as the city proper had to be evacuated. So,
gotcha. I love how there's 5 houses and 5 residents. You can't take it from me.
Technically, they were already supposed to leave, but
you know.
Yeah, what are you going to do?
Sometimes you like your house.
So
what if the ground's a little warm? Easier to cook food. Probably don't got to turn your oven on as high. Winter's probably not that bad. I mean, let's look at some positives.
Don't have to eat when you're killed by Nox's gas.
I mean, you know,
right.
Your children might mutate. You might have the first X-Men living in your basement right now.
And that leads us into another horror franchise of what was the Rob Zombie ones? The Hills Have Eyes.
Yeah.
No, Hills Have Eyes wasn't Rob Zombie.
No,
was it
was
not?
good, though.
I thought
No.
it was.
He did
Thousand-
Devil's Rejects and House of a
Devil's
Thousand
Rejects.
Corpses
That's right. Yeah.
and 3 whatever, Devil's Rejects 3, the third one, that was not very good.
Although it was a good call out, Travis, because 1977 Hills Have Eyes, Wes Craven. So
Actually, I want to talk about a kind of weird one real quick. It's like real quick. Alfred, can you mention him? Alfred Hitchcock, The Birds, was reportedly a true story. Not sure how
This
true.
blows my mind.
No
Yeah,
way.
that this
But,
was based on a real event.
So, and they didn't know until like kind of relatively recently. Some people were like doing some research there, and they found I believe, seaweed of some kind that actually caused like neurological problems in birds. So they believe that's actually what caused it to happen back in,
whoa,
black and white
Is,
movie
like-
days.
yeah,
yeah, so
but no, so
it happened in
the-
1961.
yeah, and the film came out in '63. It was in Capitola, California.
And then it
The
wasn't.
Birds was real. That's terrifying.
They didn't find the reason until like, well, I think it was like 2000 something.
Wow.
The more you know.
Right?
That
So
was
here's
just
the spookier part about that. Hitchcock said the film was actually inspired by a 1952 short story of the same name by, I'm not going to be able to say this name, Daphne du Maurier, who was a farmer. It was a story about a farmer and his family who were attacked by murderous birds in their English village. Some interpret the story as a reflection of the British experience during World War II. So the short story comes out in 1952. 1961 happens in real life. 1963, it's a franchise starting hit. That is wild. I did not know The Birds was a real story.
Was that his
Yeah,
first
and
big
like
movie?
Sharknado, also a real thing happening in Florida currently.
Actually, it's actually alligators. Let's get
I
that
saw
right.
that clip too. The guy opened his door, there's an alligator sitting in his kitchen. It's like, what?
Yeah, it's actually
Ugh.
alligators in Florida. California is Sharknado.
My bad. My bad.
It's okay. I'm sure the alligators will forgive you.
Yeah,
Um,
well, I'm not gonna go ask. I'm not a big fan of interacting with the swamp puppies.
Well, I mean, technically speaking, they're not as tough as stingrays. Just throwing it out there. Stingrays got it done when alligators couldn't. So
All right, so as far as Hitchcock goes, here's the fun part. So Hitchcock, when I think Hitchcock, I immediately go to The Birds, amongst a couple of other of his major hits. But apparently, one of his first stories was actually in 1922. It's called The Number 13, and it is unfinished. And so his first real kind of run was The
'Cause it's
Pleasure
unlucky.
Garden in 1925.
You go immediately to The Birds with Hitchcock and not
Yeah.
Psycho?
Not Psycho. Like, so I've gotten that exact same argument from so many people.
What
where
about
it's like,
Vertigo?
how do you not go Psycho, right? And I'll be the first to admit, Psycho's definitely the one that I'm sure he's most known for. It's the one where he was breaking ground with how to do horror movies. But when somebody says Alfred Hitchcock, I go to The Birds.
Well, that's for The Birds. But back to Bones.
Yeah, Bones. Sorry, hijacking your.
Oh no,
card
that
here.
was just my Alfred Hitchcock one. I have some longer ones if we want to get into that, but I figure I give somebody else an opportunity.
I mean, we already brought it up, so I'm going to go ahead and jump straight into Psycho, which is going to segue into so many other horror movies.
Get
so
ready for
Psycho,
Killer's Row.
Yeah, actually, I'm just going to list. So Psycho is inspired by a real life, classified as a serial killer. It's hard to call him that. Definitely a necrophile. I'm not going to explain what that is on camera. I'll let you Google that one.
Well, now that I've already broken terms of service for
since you
the
already
first 3
started dropping
minutes or
swear
whatever.
words. It wasn't even the first 3 minutes. That was the first word of this broadcast.
First word of the broadcast.
Psycho is based on a serial killer named Ed Gein, who was called what was it, like the something Ghoul, Pennsylvania Ghoul or something like that.
Because he had
Plainfield
two
Ghoul.
Plainfield.
That's
Ghoul.
right.
Because he had two monikers that came up in the media, right? They called him the Butcher of Plainfield and the Plainfield Ghoul.
And so he has been the inspiration for very, very, very many movies. So, of course, you have Psycho with Norman Bates, who had the taxidermied carcass of his mother hanging around that he would speak to. Also, something that happened in the real life story with Ed Gein. There's a lot more gory details with that individual. I think I'll probably just skip over and just get into all of the movies that he was an inspiration for. So, starting with one that's extremely popular, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yep, that's the one that I know him from.
Specifically, the masks made out of human skin. Then you have, of course, Silence of the Lambs with Buffalo Bill. Buffalo Bill is actually an amalgamation of several pretty well-known and well-documented serial killers. Of course, one of them being Ted Bundy, who has a plethora of like documentaries and movies and stuff made out of like after him.
Yeah, didn't the famous lotion line actually come from the doll maker?
I have no idea. I know that they kind of used three big serial killers for Buffalo Bill, and it was Ed Gein, Ted Bundy, and then a guy in Pennsylvania where he had literally had people in a hole in his basement that he was like keeping there long term. So yeah, a lot of people think that Ed Gein was the inspiration behind Hannibal Lecter. He's not. Hannibal Lecter was based on a serial killer from Mexico known as Dr. Salazar or Alfredo Bali. It's the last name.
Yeah. Well, while you
hardly matters on that one, but yeah. So
Buffalo
Texas
Bill,
Chainsaw Massacre, Psycho,
Silence of the Lambs,
and then just a ton more. Like,
well, the most famous probably being Gary Heidnik, right? Because you have Gary Heidnik who kidnapped and tortured multiple people at the same time and frequently caused them to eat food that was made out of their compatriots. And so Buffalo Bill with the pit in the cellar, so to speak. It was
that was the Pennsylvania guy. I can't remember his name right now. Is Gary Heidnik? Is that guy's name?
Yeah, but that's wild to think about.
Yeah, he's like, and I mean, pretty much every socially awkward serial killer portrayal in a movie is going to be based somewhat on Ed Gein. He is literally that famous and that
he kind
big of an inspiration for so many horror stories because the man in real life is terrifying.
Oh yeah, well, and he was one of the not the first, but one of the first ones that got major attention in like the newspapers and on the media for just being such a bizarre example of a human.
And his house became like a tourist destination for people until they burned it. Until it mysteriously burned down, and the whole town council just happened to be there going, "Oh, we can't put it out."
Yeah,
sorry.
You know, you're familiar with the Netflix show Monster? They did like a season with Evan Peters playing Jeffrey Dahmer.
I actually
next season Charlie Hunnam is playing Ed Gein.
No kidding.
Good choice. Charlie Hunnam is a hell of an actor. I think he'll do great.
So I think that'll be interesting. It's actually that season is going to be called, I think, Original Monster.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, he's definitely one of the first. He's definitely at the peak. So, you know, from a literary perspective, people call it the golden age of serial killers. Ed Gein is definitely at the forefront of like chronological order for that.
So I actually just watched one today. 1 second, I'm looking it up so I can get the information. And I thought it was a different story, and maybe y'all can help me out. Now, there was a story about two brothers. I want to say it was in the 90s, could have been the early 2000s. Not the Menendez brothers. That's what I watched today. But there was another set of brothers that like killed their parents and then went to a basketball game. And they ended up being in that game when the photograph that they ended up using for the basketball card had them in the background. It's become a major collectible item to find that basketball trading card. But I did
I'm Googling it right now.
Yeah, fantastic. To continue on, though, I actually just today watched the documentary.
It was 100% the Menendez brothers, Ryan.
They went to the basketball game?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good to know. They didn't talk about that in the documentary I watched. But yeah, just today I watched the documentary about the Menendez brothers, and then it offered up Monsters, which is by the same people that did the was it Bundy? No. Jeffrey Dahmer dramatization. And so highly recommend for.
It's actually the second. That's actually the second season of Monster.
Oh, there you go. So yeah, second season is Menendez brothers.
Jeffrey Dahmer,
fantastic story. Yeah. I will say so
far. Having some internet trouble.
Yeah,
it sounds like it's. We'll switch over to the spooky wookie stuff now and get into some more of the supernatural because I know Bones is dying to talk about his connected franchise.
While we're still talking on the serial killers, I do have to mention one that spawned. He wasn't a serial killer, but some murders that spawned a major franchise. That's the Gainesville murders and Scream, which was Kevin Williamson saw the whole Gainesville thing and decided to write the story for Scream 1. And now we're going to have Scream 7. So I'm actually kind of excited for that.
I didn't realize that at all about Scream, and I'm kind of a Scream fan. Big crush on Neve Campbell, in case she's watching this ever.
Yeah, the real
Danny-
Gainesville murder. Was Danny Rowling.
Danny Rowling murdered 5 college students in Gainesville.
The
over like 4
Gainesville
days.
Ripper.
He also killed some people in Shreveport, or says he did. I don't know if it was actually ever proven, but he admitted it.
Those serial killers, it's so hard to tell when they're telling the truth and when they're lying because they're such narcissists. Like, they're so...
Oh, yeah. Some of them will admit to 150, 200 bodies buried out in the swamp.
Also hard to prove on a lot of those because there's so many just missing persons nationwide.
Well,
this is taking a dark turn.
Yeah. Well, it's such a fascinating thing, right? Because some of them will say, actually, I only killed these 2. I'm admitting to these 2.
You have
not
some
these
that, like,
34.
have conclusive proof that they killed, like, a bunch of people and will still swear by their innocence. Like,
Yeah.
which baffles me. I was like, well, I mean, at this point, you're caught, right?
But yeah, no, so the Scream one I think is an excellent one to bring up, Bones. I know I lost internet just a minute ago. Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, I think that the true story about Scream with Danny Rowling was an absolutely fascinating case. And in case any of our viewers haven't picked it up yet, this is going to be kind of a hybrid episode. It's primarily talking about the based on the true story aspects to a lot of movies. That is not saying the movies were directly inspired by these events, but sometimes only that they mirrored them so much that it became truly bizarre. In some cases, the based on the true story is just straight up fact. And I think, if I remember correctly, Scream literally was inspired by by Danny Rowling.
Williamson, the screenwriter for it, that wrote the story, like literally saw the Gainesville murder stuff and was like, I'm gonna write a story.
Yeah, there you go.
Also, I think there's like a weird thing that happened. I can't remember exactly, but with Danny Rowling being like somehow they suspected him, but they in Scream when they have like the boyfriend, they suspect the boyfriend, but then he's like gets the phone call and he's like, oh, it's not him. Something similar happened along the lines to Danny Rowling, I believe. And I think that's probably part of the reason why that was in there, obviously.
My favorite guy's still the nerdy dude in the first one that talks about horror movies. I can't think of. He had that live TV show for a while, The Experience or something. The Jamie Kennedy Experience, is that it?
So we did have a comment come from Albie Hernandez in our live chat that I'm going to bring up right now. He's saying the most disturbing killer that he's heard of is Albert Fish. Now,
I literally just brought him up because there's a whole bunch of horror movies based on him too. I literally just pulled this up. So Albert Fish, known as the Brooklyn Werewolf,
the Gray Man.
Yep. So all the Gray Man stories are based off this guy. He was a notorious predator, mostly of orphaned children. It was the height of the Great Depression. He was also a known cannibal, which is also sometimes they call him the Brooklyn Vampire. I want to say he's suspected of killing upwards of 40 children.
Yeah. I know he's most
during that era.
He's most famous and were committed for 3 murders between 1924 and 1928, but is suspected to have a body count over 50.
Yeah, there's some people on the high side put it close to 100. I think that's a little extreme considering how fast he escalated as far as serial killers go, because you have those ones that can get to that, but you'll notice that they kind of spaced out. His was definitely a frenzy, but yeah, so he inspired a whole lot of really particular horror characters, specifically ones that engaging in cannibalism, because I know Albert Fish, and then drawing a blank on the name of the Scottish clan. I literally looked it up right before this episode, that were notorious cannibals, were big inspirations for horror movies, of course, about being captured and eaten by other people.
Indeed.
Tastes like chicken.
Delicious long pork. Anyway, not going to get us censored on YouTube anytime soon. It is interesting to see a lot of the cannibalism rise, particularly pre-1940. You're talking through the 1920s, cannibalism became a national fear because it became so prevalent in these desperate locations. And between that and the discovery of certain medicinal and chemical uses for things like pufferfish venom coming out of the islands near Florida, that's where we get the rise of the zombie movies, and we get Land of the Dead, and all that jazz, because we don't want to get eaten. Fear of cannibalism.
Hey, have you seen grocery prices? I'm just throwing that shit out there. Like, it's about to make a comeback.
Speaking of cannibalism, I'm going to go watch a musical on Halloween called Cannibal the Musical, which is actually inspired by Alfred Packard and his whole travel from Utah to Colorado, and they got like stuck in the mountains, and maybe somebody ate some people.
You
Damn.
got to do what you got to do. I mean,
All
it
right.
happened to the Donners.
I'm going to throw it back. Alexander Sonny Bean was
Sonny
the
Bean
Scottish.
Clan. That's
Yeah.
the one it was.
But yeah, I mean, you say cannibalism, and everybody immediately goes to the Donner Party, right? That's the turn of phrase, at least
Everybody
in America.
freezes.
Man, his internet is just not doing him any favors today. When people say cannibalism, the first person I think of is Hannibal Lecter.
Oh, absolutely. Hannibal Lecter is the go-to cannibal.
But have y'all seen the show Hannibal?
Dude, he was the best Hannibal. Like, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
it was
like
so good.
I like the guy in the
So good.
movies. I know he's really famous, and I should know his name. And yes, I'm a douchebag for not knowing it. But
Mads
the guy
Mikkelsen.
from the TV, the guy from the
Mads
TV
Mikkelsen.
show was so much better than the movie. Like, yes, the guy in the movies was really good, but dude, the TV show guy was so much better.
Mads Mikkelsen, his portrayal of Hannibal Lecter was.
I mean, Anthony Hopkins, though, I still think is the best
Dude.
Hannibal Lecter. Like, I'm sorry.
Have you watched Hannibal?
With Mads Mikkelsen? I have not, no.
Yeah, so
you got to.
How can you weigh in if you haven't seen it? You're just saying.
Because I've seen the Brian Cox, I've seen the Gaspard, I've seen, was it Aaron Thululi?
Yeah, but we're talking about a specific. We're comparing a specific one, and you can't like justify saying like this is the best one we haven't seen the one we're talking about.
Dude, I promise.
I'll
Like,
watch
I get
it,
what
but
you're saying. Like,
Anthony Hopkins is such a great actor.
He is, but like even the character that plays opposite of in the TV show, like the way those two work together is probably why I would give it to the show over the movie, dude. Like,
I will say Mads Mikkelsen is a dope actor. Like, I'm not going to take any
And it's
credit.
got
from
Lawrence.
him. I
Dude,
love Mads Mikkelsen.
Hopkins is an amazing actor. How many? Like, he's made so many great movies. Like, but oh man, it's almost like the dude from the TV show was just made for it, man. And again, the guy that plays off of him, like they play off of each other.
Mhm.
Oh my god, dude!
Hugh Dancy.
Hugh Dancy, yeah.
And like I said,
Well,
Lawrence
I mean-
Fishburne is also in it, which is, he's also a great actor. Love to see him and stuff.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah,
but it was those
Lawrence
two.
Fishburne
Though.
plays Jack Crawford, and I will admit, as somebody that actually has seen both, it is really hard to argue or fight against the chemistry that we get between Jodie Foster, and the entire Silence of the Lambs movie. Right? It was a instant classic for a reason. But the Hannibal television show is so much more intimate experience. You get to understand things a lot better. You get to see what was happening around all of that jazz, and you don't just get to see Hannibal as the monster. You see him much more as the sophisticated individual that happens to be involved in some monstrous stuff. And so
Shit happens.
I do highly encourage anybody that hasn't seen it, check out Hannibal. It's an absolutely wonderful show, especially if you're in the mood for a little bit of drama, spook. And here's the grand ironic part: a wonderful cookbook. Just
Hey, I
a
have that
fantastic
cookbook. It's
cookbook.
phenomenal.
Hannibal cookbook.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so good.
A little bit of kidney and some fava beans.
But yeah, so there are several serial killers, and we could go on and on about serial killer inspired movies forever. But
we should
I do
switch
think
to the supernatural.
all right. So I'll bridge the gap here. I wanted to bring up The Exorcism of Emily Rose. So The Exorcism of Emily Rose is kind of loosely based on the story of Annalise Mitchell. I think it's Michael. Who died after undergoing multiple exorcisms performed by 2 Roman Catholic priests. Now, according to what I looked up, Annalise Michael's family sought an exorcism after her psychiatric medications failed to improve her symptoms. The priests began performing exorcisms in 1975, and Michael died of malnourishment and dehydration after 67 sessions.
Yeah, that's right. I remember reading that as well.
Now, for those of you wondering, yes, Michael's parents and the priests were found guilty of negligent homicide. But in 2005, The Exorcism of Emily Rose comes out and is a truly chilling take on the story and looking at small, isolated communities and the way that they interact. And so 67 sessions. They had these exorcisms performed and never had an improvement or anything change, and we're doing it because her psychiatric medication failed. Now,
It's a
Yeah,
little
this
much.
is the
Yeah.
70s.
1975, yeah, right in the middle 70s. And so the story itself, obviously, when you're dealing with exorcisms, you're talking about demonic possession, which, again, as far as in competition goes, it's not going to beat out serial killers, but demonic possession and the rituals used to control it, I think, have inspired an incredible amount of movies, all the way up from Rosemary's Baby to The Exorcist. Yeah.
How many has the Catholic Church itself spawned?
So
The
that's
Rite?
really interesting. Yeah, the Rite,
Yeah.
the Order. It's about the Carolingian exorcists. And so yeah, some of these that are based on exorcisms, when you start looking into the real stories, I'm not gonna lie, they are bone chilling, but kind of in the worst way, right? You see the serious mistreatment of people and the fear of mental illness and physical illness that they had when they didn't understand what was going on. And you continue to see media crop up in the horror genre about this kind of phenomenon, about demonic possession and, you know, satanic worship and yada yada yada, including stuff that just came out with there's a lot of witch stuff. The Witch just came out, and I forget the actress's name, but she's really good.
I thought for sure that The Exorcist would also be based off that same story from Germany with Michelle, but it's not. It's based on the exorcism of a person named Roland Doe.
Oh, it's based off the Roland Doe exorcism? I didn't even know
Mhm.
that. Tell me more.
Jesuit priest Father Walter Halloran was the last surviving eyewitness and participant in the exorcism. Basically, looks like German Lutheran family during the early 1940s experienced a traumatic death event in the family and then had like a psychological break. This was way before, obviously, most modern medicines to treat psychological issues and disorders, and the family being devout Lutherans. Decided that he had been possessed because he would speak of himself as infested, I think was the term that they used.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, they took over performing exorcisms on him, and that's what inspired the novel and the film.
All right, for those of you that want to know more, there is a television show called The True Story of the Exorcist, Roland Doe. Highly recommend checking that out. The UCLA college actually interviewed the author, I suppose, not the author of the book, but interviewed a gentleman by the name of Henry Ansgar Kelly about his reaction and the inspiration and the story of an exorcism performed on a 14-year-old boy. Definitely worth a check out. So yeah, that was one I definitely wanted to bring up with the Exorcism of Emily Rose and its similar movies. There are several exorcist stories that continue to make the round and inspire sources of media, and this is where we start seeing things like we discussed with Ed Gein, right? The inspiration will branch out and change and twist. There are certain people that, with Roland Doe, the reason it surprised me is I had heard that Roland Doe actually inspired the Paranormal Activity movies, so the found footage, ghost hauntings, and that kind of thing. And so,
That
yeah,
movie scared the shit out of me.
dude, same.
Everybody said it was real.
Like
all
Blair Witch
real.
Project and that first
That
drop.
movie. Yeah, I was younger. I believe that. I was like, nope, this is real. I'm turning this shit off.
Am I the only one that kind of laughed a little bit at the Blair Witch found footage deal when the guy has the drippy nose boogers while he's trying to talk into the camera?
No, and
I mean-
that's I actually, when it comes to the Blair Witch Project, third-hand information, right? I heard the story from a guy that supposedly yada yada yada, but I did have an opportunity to talk to some of the people that were involved in the creation of that movie. And from what I can tell, they wanted to make this movie, and they had a budget that was in the red already. It was already negative and had zero money. So they went to the local supermarket. They went to a Walmart, effectively, and bought the camera, and then went and filmed the movie, and then took the camera back and returned it.
Makes sense.
And so, yeah, the Blair Witch Project, for a while, that was all anybody could talk about. That was a genre-defining movie in regards to found footage and its use in the horror genre. And I think we at least for me, I give it a lot of credit because I think it was a truly inspired piece, and it's a hard way to do movies. Not many people can actually pull it off. Found footage is not the favorite way for a lot of viewers.
But you couldn't
And
make
so-
it today because of social media.
Yeah. Any case, so we talked about exorcisms. Let me pass the ball. Bones, take us into the next one.
Well, continuing on the line of the supernatural, this is, I think, a particularly interesting group of movies because it's not just one. This true story, so to speak, didn't just spawn one movie, but a whole series of movies, and that
Ooh,
is
interesting.
Ed and Lorraine Warren. They are the basis for. They are the main characters in the Conjuring movie, which is like one of them,
Mhm.
actually a really great movie. I love the Conjuring, very very spooky.
Yeah, the
Very good.
whole universe I think is really really good.
And in fact, Lorraine, before she passed away, what she was like a consultant for the movie and even had a little cameo part in it. So that's pretty cool, I thought. But in that whole series, like you have The Conjuring. The Conjuring 2 is based on another thing that they investigated called the Infield Poltergeist. The Amityville Horror was based off something that they were involved in. The Haunting in Connecticut was another movie that's based off something that they were involved in. Annabelle was in fact, they have a museum, or they had a museum. I assume it's still there. I don't know who owns it now, but they actually have the original doll that was the basis for the Annabelle story in the museum. It's in a little glass thing that says "Do not open."
Do not touch, do not
yeah.
open.
It's actually a rag doll, though, not a porcelain doll as it is in the movies.
It's like a Raggedy Ann looking doll.
Yeah. I mean, it's a rag doll, yeah. And then there's also another Conjuring movie. I haven't actually seen The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, but also another one that is based off of
I haven't
another
seen that
story
one
of
either.
theirs.
Well, and here's the part about the Conjuring universe and the stories that inspired it is so much of those stories have remained entirely unexplained, right? Like nobody's been able to go in and show that there's reason that these events happened the way they did. And there's people that can logic it away and file it away nice and safe in the realm of impossibility. But one of the fascinating things for me is all the way up until she died, like a lot of these events were very real and remained very unexplained.
Yeah. And I think that's part of what makes these stories so interesting, and also what allows them to be, horror stories to begin with. Like the fact that there is a bunch of stuff that's unexplained, even if you don't believe in it, it still is like always that little edge to it.
Yeah, that little bit of doubt.
Because you're like, how did this all happen? Maybe there's some reason, but who knows for real. I do think it's interesting that they founded the oldest ghost hunting group in New England as well, called NESPR.
I did not know that.
The New England Society for Psychic Research, which is kind of a silly name in my opinion, but whatever. You do you. But yeah, it's still around.
We do everything in New England when I live there. We best football, best hockey, solid baseball, Ghostbusters, I guess.
Are you really
we do it all.
Really gonna pop off with the Sabres as the
Speaking of horror stories,
Bruins are out of Boston.
The Sabres have always been trash, though. They're not a great hockey team.
And
anyway,
just lost
back
15 subscribers. But yeah, no, I think that Bones is right. I think that the stories, even the ones that have perfectly reasonable explanations, that when people looked at it, be like, okay, it was carbon monoxide poisoning that caused delirium, or it was hypothermia that caused delirium, or whatever. Those kind of stories where you have the doubt, where it's like, am I just saying this because it makes sense and it explains everything away, despite the fact that I'm reaching? Was it ghosts? Was it demons? Like, what was going on? And you start getting into some of their truly bizarre stories about they were like hikers or campers or something that I believe were in Russia, just real short, where they went out, they're experienced campers, they go out, have a good time, they're camping. A blizzard comes in, snows them in, And when they find them, they had removed all of their clothing, which hypothermia symptom, right? Neatly folded them and ran out into the snow, and they found them in various states.
You're talking about
Yeah.
the Dyatlov Pass incident?
Yeah, with the radioactivity. Yeah. And that's one that always spooked me because there's perfectly reasonable explanations for that. Like, you could see how that happened. And then there's just enough weirdness to it where you start to doubt, you start to wonder. Travis, what do you got?
What all is connected? Like, what all horror movies are connected with the Warrens and the work that they did? Like, I know you had The Conjuring, but what else?
The Conjuring 2, and then the other one, the Conjuring
Devil Made Me Do It.
Devil Made Me Do It. All of the Amityville horrors, not necessarily.
So were the Warrens actually involved in the Amityville?
They were the first ones to be there to investigate, or
haunting
one of the
research?
first ones to be there to investigate. What else? Haunting in Connecticut is another one.
Okay.
Annabelle, and the series of movies. So I think that they just had like Annabelle, and then the people that made the movies went on and like just started making shit up. Conjuring.
Well,
Conjuring,
So I don't know a whole lot about the Amityville horror movie, other than like the scene where like the furnace is talking to the guy in the basement, or when the Indian head picture would pop up on the TV for the guy. I do know it's based on Robert DeMeo. I want to say is his name, DeFeo maybe. Again, chronic drug user, also probably had a little bit of antisocial personality disorder, along with some other undiagnosed like mental illnesses. Kills his entire family. However, his story never lines up with how they found this family. Because he says that he shot his parents twice. He drugged everybody until they were asleep. Shot his parents twice, and then shot everybody else in the family once. Left their bodies there. Ran down to the bar and says, "Help! I think my parents have been shot." They come back and find the whole family massacred. So he says he drugged them. Autopsy says none of those people had drugs in their systems. He says he shot him with a deer hunting rifle. All the ballistics show it was like a 35 caliber Marlin lever action, which again doesn't line up with his story. He admits that he's the one. He's like, I must have been the one that did it during like a psychological state or whatever. But yeah, it's just weird that if they found no drugs in their system, but everybody was lying face down when they had been shot. The bodies hadn't been staged or moved because their blood was like where he committed the acts at. So yeah, a lot of stuff in that story just didn't line up, and it's pretty wild that even to this day with like modern, crime scene reconstruction and stuff like that, they can't figure out how he managed to get everybody in his family without alerting the neighbors. And not waking up other family members because he didn't have access to any type of sound suppression device for this lever action. Mostly because you can't mount them on there, non-concentric barrels. But that's a big technological thing.
All right, so let's move on to the next one. So when I was doing my research for this particular episode, there were a lot of really, really good ones, and I'm sure Travis has some fantastic serial killer ones that I won't touch. But there's one of them that really surprised me. I didn't know about it till I started researching for this episode. Was based on a true story, and that's Nightmare on Elm Street.
Bullshit.
Straight up. So there are several interviews with director Wes Craven that say he was inspired by articles in the Los Angeles Times about the Hmong. Am I saying that right? Hmong refugees that died in their sleep after fleeing war and genocide in Southeast Asia. These deaths were so unexplainable and so bizarre and so contained to this group that they went from calling it SUDS, with just sudden unexplained or unexpected death syndrome, all the way up to the Asian death syndrome or the sleeping sickness, because they have no idea to this day what killed him.
Freddy. Although I like to think his name is actually probably more of a Kyle or maybe like a Bill. Not so much a Freddy.
William
like Freddy
Krueger.
just doesn't do it.
William Krueger.
Yeah, see? It's
Fred
got a ring
Krueger
to it.
III.
Yeah, Freddy's just too nice.
Obviously, that's just like a very loosely based on like he saw.
Yeah, he read the articles and wrote the story,
and then made it into something. And that's why I love Wes Craven, because he's
Yeah.
A horror genius in my opinion. One of the goats for sure.
So I looked it up because I had to confirm what Ryan was saying. I love the inspiration for the depiction of Freddy Krueger was based on a single childhood experience that Wes Craven had with an elderly neighbor wearing a ugly sweater and the little flat brim. I call them old man hats. And so he was doing something in his yard, turned around, there was an old man there, and it startled him, and that stuck with him long enough to where he created an entire horror franchise out of it.
Right. Well, and so one of my favorite
Now
stories
he's going to have
that,
to pay him money. All because of you, Travis. Bringing it up. Royalties. Going to that neighbor.
so one of my favorite stories about Nightmare on Elm Street was actually about the situation revolving around when they were filming it, because the prosthetics took so much time and effort to get applied that he couldn't take them off or take a break, right? You couldn't slip out of your Freddy suit to catch a smoke and cool off and then go back and continue filming. And so there were several times where they would have to go to lunch, and because of the low production budget, they were going across the street and eating at this local franchise or chain diner. It was effectively a Denny's. And the actor talked about how miserable of an experience it was that he'd be just trying to eat his breakfast, and children and people would see him and become truly terrified in real life.
He went after kids.
But yeah, so as far as Nightmare on Elm Street goes, that's the one that caught me most off guard, dealing with the refugees and the killing fields in Cambodia, and the sudden unexpected death syndrome just cropping up and still being unexplained.
Albie brought up a horror movie, again, based on a serial killer, which is Henry, that has, again, an actor that we've brought up many times on this show with Michael Rooker.
Yeah.
So
Has
good.
been in every single one of our favorite, he's been in a lot of my favorite movies. But yeah, that's also, again, based on real life serial killers. Just wanted to give the shout out to Albie.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what we haven't mentioned yet? Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah.
How is that horror?
I mean, have you seen Natural Born Killers?
To be fair, yeah.
Okay, stand by. I've seen. What was the one with?
I'm sorry, Bonnie and Clyde were they literally went on a murderous rampage. Everybody always wants to talk about the they want to romanticize it via the dime store novel kind of mentality of it.
They went on a rampage for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, they went out of their way to kill people. They laid ambushes for people on the side of the road. They were awful, and the people that were oh, Bonnie was just coerced by Clyde Barrow into doing it. She was as sick as he was. Both of them were just the worst.
Well, Natural Born Killers was a solid movie.
Based on Bonnie and Clyde.
But which one did you prefer? That one or the Kevin Costner movie? It was a Highwayman?
I'm going Natural Born Killers for me, just because it's a fucking old movie.
It's a much better horror movie. I feel like The Highwayman is a docudrama, which again, it really portrayed Kevin Costner's character in a really positive light, and that guy was a little bit skeevy.
Was he? I didn't know anything about it.
He was. So he was. It's basically again, it's a real guy, right? He was a Texas Ranger, had a bit of a reputation of working outside of the law to make sure things got done, and there's more than a handful of his convictions that are a little questionable, but at the end of the day, he was a really good people finder. I mean, he was probably one of the best bounty hunters the Texas Rangers ever had as far as tracking people down. Now, how he went about getting them was where you started to get into his little muddied waters of morality and not actually following the rules, and him being kind of a scumbag. He was also a domestic abuser, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly.
I mean, what man at that time wasn't,
No kidding.
Oh, let's not judge.
I think we can still kind of judge him.
Totally judge him.
I think we can judge that, yeah.
Yeah,
It wasn't a good time in history.
My grandfather grew up in the 20s, fought in World War II, was a dirt farmer, was just crazy poor, and not once did he ever do anything abusive towards my grandmother. So I feel like we can go ahead and judge a guy for being a domestic abuser.
All right, I know we're getting close to time here, but I did want to bring up one more, and the reason I bring this up is because it spawned almost it comes from an entire genre of movies, right? And the movie that spawned the genre, in my opinion, with Jaws and Shark Attack movies. Now,
Sharknado.
there's been a lot of interesting shark movies and Shark Attack movies, a lot of misinformation
Sharknado.
about sharks, and a lot of controversy around the topic and the genre, right? Because you almost want to call shark movies their own genre now. They're part horror, they're part action, and they're part creature feature.
They're just creature features, what they are.
They're just creature features.
But one
You're
that
talking about
talking
Deep
about
Blue
open
Sea?
water. Open water.
open water,
Deep
So
Blue Sea
open
would be
water-
hilarious.
Deep Blue Sea, yeah. Now, Open Water is a 2003 movie based on the story of Tom and Eileen Lonergan, who went missing scuba diving the Great Barrier Reef off the coast of Australia. And the entire movie is kind of a story about their experiences and that kind of thing. And I couldn't get through a whole based on a true story event without bringing up shark movies, because while the real accounts of shark attacks are rare and very rarely as dramatic as you see them in the movies, that's definitely one that many people have a fear of, right? Because it's so possible to just be out in the water and be mistaken for prey and have one of the most
Highly
terrifying
unlikely.
creatures on the planet coming after you. Yeah, highly unlikely.
People are very
But-
scared of the ocean in general.
Yeah,
I mean, to be fair, it's pretty nebulous. We don't know everything that's in it. That has that mystery of like things that go bump in the night. I mean, speaking of horror,
yeah.
the unknown is frightening.
Well, particularly when you combine that with not only is it the unknown, but we have a deep-seated fear of being eaten. We kind of covered this earlier with the zombies, right? We don't want to be eaten. We don't want to be prey. You combine
what
that
does she
with an
look like?
environment. Yeah. Combine that with an environment. I'm just going to ignore Eric for that one. Just going to pin that one aside. With a fear of a place that we can't explore, that we obviously don't belong, and with giant predators in it. So,
All right, stand by. We gotta do something real quick because this is super goes with everything.
you got it.
All right, so what's everybody's biggest like fear thing? That's like an awkward, and by fear I mean so like my biggest fear is the ocean because I can't see what the fuck is under me when I'm out in the ocean. Like I don't know, and I can't swim anyway. So when I go out, I'm in a life jacket or some sort of boat thing. But huge fear. Like I can deal with it, but like the whole time anxiety through the roof because I don't know what's under me. Like heights suck, but much easier to deal with because I know what's around me. But so what's everybody's like big fear thing?
Well, I suppose you want something more interesting than I fear disappointing my family and dying alone.
Yeah,
Everybody dies alone. It's a singular experience. You can't take someone with. Well, you can, sort of, but
Romeo and Juliet.
it's definitely not. Again, they died at different times, so again, they went alone together.
You and your fucking college education.
Romeo and Juliet, the story of a 6-day romance between a 13-year-old and a 17-year-old that ended in the deaths of 6 people.
Talk about a
let's
horror
see.
story.
Yeah, talk about a horror story.
It's just Alabama.
Oh,
That's an interesting one for me because a lot of the classic phobias I've never really had a problem with. And that's not to say, oh, look how brave I am. It's just that it never triggered that kind of like survival response in me, right? I've never been afraid of the dark or heights or tight spaces or the ocean. I will say I have a little bit of an irrational fear about, and again, this goes back to the beginning of the episode, right? Bones doesn't believe in the spooky stuff as much. I have a healthy fear of a lot of the spooky stuff, but not in the way that you would normally expect. I don't like devices or rituals or items that communicate with
Yeah, if you want to
supernatural
send Ryan a
entities.
gift, send him a Ouija board.
Yeah,
Don't
Ryan a
do
Ouija
it.
Board.
Um,
Ouija board, tarot cards, rune stones.
Don't give me that Ouija board. Yeah, I don't like them. I don't like the idea that if there is something across the veil, that you're just like, ringing them up on the telephone and inviting them over for dinner. I just watched a horror movie with 2 of my friends today called Talk to Me, which was
That's good. I love that
terrifying to
movie.
me. Yeah, absolutely loved it. It was fantastic. But that's kind of what that's about is like, okay, we're going to communicate with people that are in purgatory or in limbo. And it was frightening in a good way. I love a good horror movie. But yeah, I guess that would be mine is I don't like the idea of just communicating with a world beyond this one.
all right, go on, James. What's yours?
Definitely tight spaces, man. I'm not necessarily claustrophobic because I don't care about being in somewhere where I know I can get out, but like caving and stuff like that, fucking just no, man, no. I watched this fucking video about this guy who like filmed his own fucking death because he got stuck in a cave. And
Oof.
it's
Oh, man.
fucking
Yeah,
that's
crazy.
rough.
Yeah, I watched some of that video. It was the spelunker. He slipped and ended up head down in basically a U-bend.
Yep.
Tried to crawl forward, couldn't get it, and then when he tried to crawl back out, he got stuck because there was just no place to get turned around. And since he was like this, basically in a downturn of it, he sat there until he died. Filmed the whole experience, which is awful and terrifying. So yeah, I'll go with Bones on. I'll agree with Bones. That is pretty frightening of being stuck in like an enclosed space. Mine is wildly irrational by comparison to everyone else's. I have a deep-seated fear of there actually being like crazy hill folk that will kidnap me and drag me off into the beyond. Like,
I'm just gonna clip
watched-
that real quick.
yeah,
Yeah.
dude, I watched Deliverance at a real young age, and like I am terrified of the South. Like, it's just like everyone's like, "Do you want to go like pop over to Louisiana? Because like we're right here, you know, in Texas." And I was like, "Fucking absolutely not!" Like, that's where the swamp people are. I'm fucking out of here.
I ain't
like,
doing that.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure they don't exist, but again, the same thing with you guys not wanting to go into the abandoned mental facility. I'm not trying to fuck around and find out.
Well, so when I look at mine, like obviously
Take
that's the
that,
first thing
Bama.
that came to my mind. Oh, was
sure,
about
there's some lovely places in the South.
yeah, it's fantastic.
Not
Well, I
gonna
mean, you
find
get into some of that backwoods, especially through the Appalachian Mountains and the Rocky Mountains and stuff. They get spooky back there.
Wrong direction. Rockies are over Bones' direction.
Yes, but the Rockies have the same amount of like there's spooky stuff up in the hills
That's
kind
just-
of stories.
Sasquatches and then lizard people at the Denver airport. That's not.
I was thinking about it for a second. The first thing that came to my mind obviously was the Ouija boards, and as you noticed, it's a famous thing amongst my friends that I do not enjoy those kind of things. However, I would be remiss if I didn't admit a real world, like wildly irrational fear of parasites. The idea of a predatory living thing in my skin or living in my stomach or something like that, even with the knowledge that we do have them and they're like good for us on certain levels.
Ryan's afraid of the thing.
Yeah, like
I'm afraid of the Lone Star tick because I don't want to be allergic to red meat.
What?
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
that's a real
that's
thing.
fucking terrifying.
It's a real thing,
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Well,
we need to
you get to be a
eradicate
kid.
those.
and have to dig a chigger out of yourself at a young age, I think it just sticks with you.
Oh, what?
and
Chigger? It's so. This is false, Ryan. They don't burrow into your skin. They bite you, and they actually leave a hard coagulated nodule under your skin, but they don't actually burrow in. So all those people's like, there's a chigger that burrowed into my leg. I said, no, it left a hard nodule of coagulated blood that your skin sealed over, which is the little red dot.
Yeah, which is fantastic, but really hard to explain to a child. And so since then, after seeing videos of like botfly infestations and tapeworms and
Real fear. Botflies are terrifying.
What? What are those?
Botflies?
What the fuck are you
Botfly?
guys doing to me here?
Do you not know what a borer
don't look it up,
weevil
man.
is?
Don't do it.
Yeah,
don't look it up, it's terrible.
Just continue your life without knowing what botflies are, man.
Where do they live?
it's everywhere.
everywhere.
No.
Mostly in Canada.
Yeah,
You fuck- We're too nice for those. They won't eat us. We're nice.
Wait, you have the Wolverine, which is like the least polite creature on the planet. They'll give a
Right.
honey badger a run for its money.
I mean, he's
So,
also
yeah.
the best X-Man, so it's okay.
False.
well, we're gonna get into an argument about that already. Here we are,
Yeah,
1
well,
hour.
Bones is like, hold on, let me get out my encyclopedia. He's just gonna grab a box of X-Men comics to prove that Eric's wrong.
Nobody is better than Wolverine. Anyways, you can
Except for all the
continue,
people that are better than Wolverine.
So I
Ooh.
am going to take this moment while we're sitting here arguing about Wolverine at our Based on a True Story podcast. If
You
you've
can
made
be
it this
real.
far in the episode, guys, obviously you're liking what you're viewing. You enjoy listening to four nerds talk about nerdy stuff. If you could do all the fun algorithm things, that really helps us out. Give us a like, give us a follow, tell your friends about us, leave a comment telling us how you didn't like it or did like it. Leave us on mute in the background. Whatever you got to do, it really helps us keep the lights on around here, and it helps in doing what we do. So both thank you very much for everybody still watching the show to this point, and we would really appreciate your continued support.
And just so everybody's tracking before we get off here, I'm painting this because my kid's birthday is coming up, and I've been slacking on my parental duties, so I'm making up for it while filming. And I don't have a lot of input on serial killer real life things because I've never been one to get into it a lot. Like, I've never been a Halloween person, things of that nature. I'm definitely down to do like we're doing. Like, I think it's great to do this month because a lot of people do love it and appreciate it and want to hear about it.
Oh yeah, for
So
sure.
it's such a great month for us in that sense. It's just I have some input with certain things, but like this is one of those topics I'm more here to learn and paint than anything else.
I forgot to bring this up while Ryan was talking about it, but as far as horror movies go, The Exorcist has one of the best like key tracks, like to let you know something spooky is going to happen of all time. The Exorcist, that a discordant piano, so good.
Oh yeah. Well, and I was just talking about this. When it comes to Spooky Month, obviously we're dealing with all aspects of horror. We talk about horror games, we're talking about based on a true story horror movies and television shows, and all the spooky stuff that exists in real life. Because why not be terrified as you go to sleep tonight, involving things like serial killers and hill folk? But when it comes to movies, I think
real
that
fear,
there's
Ryan. I don't appreciate that jab.
well, and that's why I had to think about mine is because I was like, that's true. I don't like Ouija boards, right? Like that's the thing. But it's also I recognize it's an irrational fear for the most part.
No fear is rational.
Yeah.
Or
But
all
when it
fears
comes to
irrational.
parasites,
Yeah, I was like, by your perspective.
but you know, when it comes to horror movies and the way that they handle themselves, a lot of people like different kinds of things, right? And you look at a lot of the horror games that have made it big, like Five Nights at Freddy's, where it is based entirely off of unexpected jump scares. That's kind of its whole thing, right? A lot of movies try to do that too. Unless you handle it in the appropriate way, it makes for a really, really cheap experience and you really don't like it. One of my personal favorites, just like Travis was saying, is films that will absolutely warn you 20 seconds, 30 seconds before it happens. Something big's coming. You should be worried about it.
Jaws.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so, yeah, I did want to ask, I know, Eric, you said you're not super into, like, the spooky season. I love spooky season. Halloween is amazing. It's one of my favorite times of year, and it's right near my birthday, so I'm always excited. And so I like spooky stuff. And I wanted to ask, does anybody have a favorite horror movie, something you watch frequently because of how good it is? Or maybe a most scary movie that you've seen?
Scream.
Scream, man. Okay. You did mention being a Scream fan earlier.
Yeah, that was the first one I really got into because it's not too over the top with like gore and everything like that, or it's not too crazy. Like it's more of an intro to the genre is Scream. Like I've watched the other ones, obviously the Freddy's, the fucking Jasons, and everything else, and like it's just so over the top. So that it was nice. Like Scream is just that good entry. And I know what you did last summer. Stupid movie. Sorry, Freddie Prinze. You're an amazing voice actor. Fucking stupid movie. I don't want it to come back.
God, that's so vehement.
Yeah, he feels strongly about this.
Yeah,
I didn't know. Okay.
He's ready to fight Freddie Prinze Jr. too, apparently.
I mean, I'll take him in like a video game, not in real life.
What about you, James?
I had to think about. I actually just recently made a list of my top 10 favorite movies for my friend. I have to say my favorite horror movie is probably I Saw the Devil.
Solid choice.
It's a Korean horror film. It's not like your typical spooky film. It's a very uncomfortable thriller with a horrific ending.
Yeah.
So, Albie chimed in with his favorite horror film, which is Return of the Living Dead 2.
Solid choice.
So, I have not seen it. I'm not big on zombie films, unless it's like Zombieland.
It's like the worst zombie film.
But it's so campy and terrible in like the best ways.
No, that's why it's not, because it tries to be. Like there's so many
it's mindless and fun.
There's so many that are really bad, but they tried to be good, but they ended up being really bad. Shaun of the Dead's a fucking masterpiece, man. That movie.
I love Shaun of the Dead. I love that movie.
Zombieland is a great movie because Bill Murray's in it. And
Zombieland is okay, actually. I like Zombieland.
And Stone's in it too. So
Zombieland 2 was a flop in my opinion. Not worth watching.
But if we're gonna go like my favorite horror film, again, not super big on the horror genre, but I'm still probably gonna have to go Silence of the Lambs as one of my all-time favorites forever. But again, I really do like those ones that are like very solidly based on true stories. And again, I'm a huge fiend for serial killer information. So
That's a solid choice, actually. I think that's perfectly fine. When it comes to my favorites, it's weird because I like certain movies for different reasons, right? Like,
actually,
I love.
hold on, I have to rescind that real fast. I
what
have
you
to
got?
go. I have to go with Evil Dead.
I was gonna actually like say Evil Dead is great.
I should have brought that up. I love Evil Dead. I will watch that movie over and over and
Anytime
over
it's
again.
on, yep.
It's just the best.
Cabin in the
No,
Woods
absolutely.
is another one like that on the same vein, the horror comedy that I will watch every time I see it. It's just so stupid.
Cocaine Bear, also horror comedy that's so good. Cocaine Bear is wild. I love it.
Well, in a lot of movies, you have a lot of fun with that, right? So this year for spooky season, me and my friends are doing psychological horror, psychological thrillers. And there are some movies that when they take themselves very, very seriously, they completely lose. They flop. We watched one called Infinity Pool that had Skarsgård in it, and I hated it. I couldn't stand it. It didn't make any sense. It was miserable. And I think that was the point of the movie, is to show how unfulfilling stuff is, especially for certain levels of wealth.
Infinity pools are terrifying. No matter how hard you swim, you never get to the other end. You just keep going, and that's
Infinity.
Yeah, that's awful.
Well, on the other side, we then sat down and watched Spirit Halloween, the movie.
Yeah.
Which, if you haven't seen it, is fantastic.
It's them sabotaging a whole bunch of like mid-level businesses to take over their rental property.
But yeah,
I kind of do like Infinity Pool a little bit, but only because of Brandon Cronenberg, and of course he is, the son of Cronenberg. The Fly,
yeah,
is a classic. Body horror
absolutely.
is one of the best. So I try. I don't know. I think I gave it a little bit more of a leeway just because of who directed it.
Well, so on the subject of the directors for stuff like that, I just watched, I believe it was called The Watchers, and it was by Shyamalan's daughter. I know we're running a little long.
Yeah,
I'll get to my favorite movie.
We may have to do like horror directors on its own episode. I feel like we could talk about a lot of really good horror directors.
So obviously you want to choose something that was like Halloween, that started the entire genre, or opened up the 80s slashers, that kind of stuff. But I'm still going to say my favorite horror movie is Alien. I still think that it was the best way to do a creature feature ever. It's a good mix of dread and a little bit of jump scare and misunderstanding.
I really like Alien because the good guy, or in this case girl, makes smart decisions. It's a horror movie that's still scary, where Ripley is not an idiot.
Yep.
Yeah, that is also one of my big thing about the like stalking murderer, like the guy that walks the whole time and still manages to catch people running. He just makes terrible decisions. Like, let's go hide and lock ourselves in the basement where there's only one way in or out. Like, no, that's a dumb idea. Don't do that.
And that's part of why Scream was so good, because they called all that shit out while they were fucking doing that movie. Homeboy called it out, and that's how everybody died. Lose your virginity in an 80s movie. See what happens.
My sister brought up her favorite horror movie, which is Seven.
Ooh,
choice.
A good one.
So good.
I always forget that's a horror style movie.
It's so good. It's such a good movie. And well acted. Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman. Like, it just really, really good.
Hard to argue with that.
So I got to get in the last thing. We got some new stuff coming up.
Yes.
So we're going to be doing the card game Survive this weekend.
Super excited.
We're also working on creating the Nerdverse, the Halloween edition. This is going to be the first time James is going to be getting involved.
Joining the crew.
Yeah, we're going to have, and there's going to be someone coming in new on their end also. So Too Legit to Crits got someone new coming in for them. That's going to be really nice and really good to see. And then on future projects we are going to work on, if anybody's watching that does ever want to do things with us, because I've had Kickstarter people and stuff reach out, we're going to do scheduling a little bit better in regards to getting your product on the show. We won't take it until we have a plan, the four of us together, because this is a hobby for us. This is just something we do on the side. It's nothing that is our actual jobs or anything like that. So But I do respect other people, so we will have a bit of a better plan going forward if anybody wants us to do their product. There's so many hiccups that happened all at once is the reason it took so long to get it out there. But we will, and it'll definitely we'll get it promoted a lot, clip stuff like that for the next month. Just to show some respect. And we also are with a dog or a pet fashion company thing now. We got some products from them. I got a couple pictures already from Travis. I've messed with them a little bit to put them up. We're going to get a couple more pictures. We're going to put it up. We're going to advertise that company. It is Scarf and Tail.
It's just me wearing dog clothes.
I mean, I wasn't going to get people too excited too early. But that's going to be coming out.
Ruin the surprise.
Yeah, we're doing like a calendar. Everyone's just going to wear bandanas. But anyways, yeah, so that's the big stuff coming up. So if anybody else is looking, they want us to do any sort of like trial or stuff, things like that, we'll do a lot better with scheduling things like that to make sure it gets out in a timely manner. So you're not waiting around or anything like that. And we definitely appreciate Survive and all their patience with everything that was going on.
Yeah, in particular, Survive, they put up through it with several natural disasters and a lot of misfortune that happened after we received their product. And I'm very, very excited to show you guys what is going on with that. It is an amazing game, and I look forward to the promo.
All right. And with that, we'll bring this episode to a close. We will continue our month of horror theme next week. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
See you guys.
Bye.